Hello, everyone, and welcome back as we continue with Chapter 6 on the French Revolution. Following the infamous Reign of Terror and the death of Maximilien Robespierre, the new French government is known as the Directory, a very short-lived governmental body that will be replaced by Napoleon Bonaparte after his coup d'etat. The period that follows is oftentimes referred to as the Napoleonic period and highlights his series of wars with in France and the other European countries. Please title your notes for today, Napoleonic Europe. So here we have Napoleon himself. One of the first things that you will notice is that he is painted oftentimes with his hand in his shirt. This was a popular 19th century characteristic to include in paintings and portraits to demonstrate calmness and like a reserved personality, a steadiness, a control. You'll see similar paintings of George Washington, other founding fathers, and other men from the time period. So after the revolution, power is largely placed in the hands of the bourgeoisie. And you'll see this is going to continue into the Industrial Revolution in our next chapter, which is really taking place simultaneously to all of this. So the new French government, as I mentioned, was the Directory, a two-house legislature that had representatives in the actual government, and then an executive branch, so to speak, made up of a 5-member board. Napoleon, again, was the military general. So Napoleon was sent to military school at a very young age, at only 9. He was originally from Corsica and had a thick Corsican accent. He was bullied and picked on by other kids in school, but he was without a doubt a military genius. He graduated at only 16 years old and became a lieutenant and ultimately made a name for himself during the French Revolution. Here you can see him in Egypt during one of his campaigns under the new French government. But what ultimately happens is the Directory starts to lose control by 1799, and their power is largely diminishing. As the Directory is showing signs of weakness, Napoleon is urged by his supporters to take power for himself. So him and his followers surround the national legislature, and they form a coup d'etat, which translates to a blow to the state. Lawmakers have no choice but to dissolve the Directory, and a new government, once again, which is the running joke in France during this time period, is formed. The new government is basically a system of consuls, where there are 3 different consuls who are supposed to equally share power. Napoleon is first consul, so he's still theoretically supposed to share power with the other 2, but as first consul, he essentially has the power of a dictator. European powers are still at war with France from the French Revolution, and by 1802, he helps facilitate peace between France and these other countries, which earns him a lot of respect among French people, and ultimately gets France back on a better track. He does help reach some of the goals of the French Revolution. He helps reform the tax code. He dismisses a lot of the government officials who are corrupt. He creates lycées, which are public schools that are open to all boys, all male children, which provides much more equality. Superior students are given jobs in government. So instead of having like a system where you're born into your social class, opportunities to move up are available. One of the biggest things that got Robespierre killed was his insistence on removing the Catholic Church and dismissing all forms of religion. Napoleon allows the church to return to France, which people are very happy about. He signs an agreement with the Pope, but he also pushes for a separation between church and state, meaning that government affairs will not be tethered to the church. So like church officials will have no say in politics. They are merely there for like social reasons. This gains Napoleon a lot of support from both religious leaders who continue to have a lot of political sway, as well as peasants who still see themselves as being very religious. So one of Napoleon's greatest achievements is a new law system. One of the greatest issues prior to the French Revolution was the sense that law and order was designed in a way that punished the poor, the third estate, and really exempted the first and second estates from all blame. So this was supposed to promote order, like on a large scale above all else, even above individual rights. So even though this seemed great among the public who just lived through the reign of terror, it did suppress freedom of speech in the press. Basically, anyone who spoke out against the consuls or Napoleon could be feed or arrested. So by 1804, Napoleon begins letting a lot of this new clout and power run to his head, and he has himself crowned the Emperor of France. And he has the Pope do this, which is largely symbolic because it symbolizes authority even over the church, even over the Pope, by having the Pope basically bestow upon him all of this authority. And you can see the coronation ceremony here with the Pope placing the crown upon Napoleon's head. Interestingly, if you take a look at the portrait over there to the right, you'll notice that he takes on a very kingly-like appearance, very absolute monarch-like. And it's interesting that the goal of the French Revolution was to end an absolute monarchy, and they essentially end up with close to the same thing. Emperor Napoleon, though, envisions a full empire for himself, one that stretches all across Europe. He also wants to control Louisiana and Florida, which France controls at the time, as well as North America and the colonies in Central America. So basically a global empire. But things start to spiral out of control. In Haiti, which was the most profitable French colony at the time, it was a slave colony. The slaves, who were largely inspired by what happened in the United States and in France, revolt. It is a revolt led by Toussaint Louverture, and you can see him painted over there to the left. And France loses its most profitable colony basically to this slave rebellion. And once they lose Haiti, Napoleon realizes that he needs to focus more on Europe. The European wars are becoming very costly, and he basically gives up on the New World. Here, this is a famous painting of the Haitian Revolution. Notice the severed heads that are being held up by the revolting slaves. Again, very much inspired by what happened in France with the guillotine and the beheadings during the French Revolution. One important part of this story is the Louisiana Purchase as well. Once the French lose Haiti, again, they kind of focus more on Europe. And to get money to help facilitate his wars and gain a stronger trade partner, Napoleon sells his territory in the New World to the Americans through the Louisiana Purchase. James Monroe, who will go on to be the 5th president, is going to France basically to purchase New Orleans, which is a port that the Americans think is going to be very important for them. And once they're in Paris in France, they're actually offered all of the Louisiana territory for $10 million. I'm sorry, for $15 million. They were going to purchase New Orleans for $10 million. So basically, instead of just getting a port city, they're getting the entire central part of the continent for only $5 million more. James Monroe cannot believe the deal once he hears it, and it becomes a constitutional crisis at the time. Thomas Jefferson, who is the president at this point, the 3rd president, doesn't believe that the U.S. president is able to purchase territory through the Constitution, but the deal is so appealing and would be so consequential for the United States, they go ahead and they go through with this purchase. In U.S. history, you will find that there is a big debate at the time about how powerful the federal branch should be, the federal government, and this is one of the acts that really expands the power of the executive branch and of federal authority. So just to get something down in your notes, Napoleon is going to sell French possessions in the New World to the Americans because he wants to focus on conquering Europe. Just to wrap up for today, in our next lesson, we will be talking about the wars between Napoleon and the European powers. Here you can see that this is the breakdown of Europe at the time. Of course, the Holy Roman Empire is gone by this point. And you can see that France is surrounded by a lot of enemies in the future. He's going to be fighting against Austria and Prussia and Spain and Portugal and Great Britain, all of which surround him. And just to show you on one more map, these are the powers that we will be exploring in our next lesson.